talk about alien abductions tonight. Are they the government? Are they the ETs? Or is it a little bit of both? What exactly is going on here? We will hopefully get some more answers tonight as we talk with Kathleen, who I am going to bring on with us right about now. So here we go, folks. Hopefully everything works out tonight. I think it will. Kind of get these feelings. Tonight's a good one.
Hello.
Kathleen, hello. This is Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands, and we are live, and I want to welcome you to the show. Hello to you.
Hello. Great to be with you.
Well, it is fantastic to have you on the show tonight. I thank you so much for taking out time to be with us. I've been looking forward to talking with you, and I thought maybe we could start with a little bit of background and leading up to your interest in the UFO phenomena and the abduction phenomena.
Sure.
Thank you.
Would you like me to begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. My interest came from my family's direct contact. I was 13 years old. I had no knowledge or information about UFOs or ET contact before that point, but it was September 20th, 1961. I was seated in the living room of my childhood home, and my mother received a phone call from her sister, Betty Hill. Betty stated that she and my Uncle Barney had a close encounter with a flying saucer the previous evening, and it had come so close that they were worried that they might have been contaminated, and Betty wanted to know what to do. She was really concerned. We had a neighbor who was a physicist, and my mother agreed to call the neighbor, and the rest is history. He told Betty what to do, and I learned for the first time that UFOs were real, and that a couple of years later discovered that they had actually abducted Betty and Barney. So that is when my interest started. It has been a long-term interest. I became very seriously interested in research and investigation back in about 1988. But I had always had an interest from the time I was 13.
Oh, well, then it's going to be real fun talking with you tonight, because it is one of my favorite topics, because there's so much reality to it. And, you know, there's so many people who are still in denial. And I'm thinking we're at a time now where, come on, people. I mean, you know, there's not millions of people out there lying. But now you actually had family members, Betty and Barney Hill. That's incredible in itself. I've covered that story several times on this show, and you know, I find it to be a true story myself. And there are people who try to debunk it, but the debunkers have been debunked, haven't they?
Yes, they have. I certainly have debunked them, and other people have as well. I wrote about the facts extensively and captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience, and I lecture all over the United States about that and about other topics, too, because I'm an ET contacted alien abduction researcher, so I travel around a lot and do a lot of lecturing. But when I talk about Betty and Barney, I often speak about setting the record straight, where I actually show the documented evidence about what happened that night, about what they had to say the next day and during the next month, and their entire history, to show that those who are claiming that they saw only a light in the sky and not non-human entities are not telling the truth. And there are a lot of false tales that have been told about this story.
Now, you've been investigating this for a long time. You've been in this field. So I want to pick your brain a little bit, and what have you discovered throughout the years? I mean, how many of these stories, these abduction stories, what are the similarities to them? What are the reasons behind them, do you think? Give us a little bit of insight on what you've discovered in your research and in your studies.
Well, I have to tell you that in the year 2012, Denise Stoner, who works very closely with me. I am the Mutual UFO Network's director of experiencer research, and Denise is on the team. She is an abductee, and she and I conducted a study, a research project in the year 2012. We developed a questionnaire based upon a number of research studies, academic research studies that had been done, and some other questionnaires as well. And we developed a 45-question questionnaire. We had 50 people who participated in that part of the study. We had 75 people who did not consider themselves to be experiencers, and they also participated as a control group in this study. And what we discovered is that there of 45 questions, there were 23 commonalities among experiencers that were not common among the general population. For one thing, in the general population, women are, there are slightly more women than men, but Denise and I discovered that 64% of the experiencers who participated in the study were women. I question that result now because, boy, so many men contact Denise and myself, maybe because we're women. I know that when Bud Hopkins was alive and in David Jacobs' research, they have been contacted by many, many women, more women than men. But the majority of individuals who contact me are men. Pretty amazing.
I was going to say, so if it would pan out that there's more women who are being abducted than men, might that mean that there's a reason behind that, such as, I don't know, reproduction or something like that?
Well, as I said, I question whether or not there are more women than men at this point, and we're going to begin a new research project. And also the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters is working on a research project right now. I'm on the board of directors of that, and we have more than 1,000 participants in our new study. So we will be coming out with statistics as well as soon as all of that information is collated. But moving on to other commonalities, we've discovered that the majority of experiencers said that they had been taken repeatedly over their lifetime. Out of 50, only 2 reported that they had only one abduction, and their characteristics were different than the rest of the group. So 48 out of 50 believed that they had been taken over a lifetime, and a majority of those, or half of those, I should say, believed that they had been taken more than 10 times.
And is there a history of even family members, like I've heard, where people have told me, well, my parents were abducted too, or is it a family thing? Did they keep it in the family?
Yes, there is very strong evidence that this follows family genetic lines. There is.
Incredible. I wonder what the whole agenda behind it is. Have you? I'm sure you've given it thought, and I mean, do you think you have an idea of why this is going on?
Uh, I have I have some hypotheses. Let me put it that way about why I think that this is occurring, and some of this has been given to experiencers. I think that it's been a very long process. I think that they have been watching the development of the human race over a very long period of time, and when we detonated the atomic bombs, it drew their attention. I believe that they realized that we were becoming technologically advanced to the point where we might go out there. And I think that they wanted to make an assessment of humans to determine where we were on an evolutionary scale and what level of hostility we were exhibiting. And what they would have discovered is that during the 20th century, we exterminated 200 million of our own kind in major and minor wars. I would be very concerned if I were observing an alien race on another planet and saw that kind of behavior and thought that they might possibly be developing the technology that would carry them to Earth to bring their brand of friendship here. So I think that that probably was of major concern to them. And I think that they slowly started to alter our behavior or attempt to alter our behavior. We do know that, and you've probably all heard this before, but about the hybrid process that the majority of experiencers have observed gestational tanks on board craft, and that they appear to carry fetuses in various stages of development. Some of them appear to be gray ETs, some of them appear to be human, and others appear to be somewhere a cross between human and grays, and sometimes more human, sometimes more gray. What is this all about? That raises questions, assuming that this is true and it's been told over and over again. Many of us researchers believe that the various stages of development are actually a process that is taking place to develop a better human, a human that might be able to communicate with this ET race, a human that will be kinder and more benevolent than what we are now. And it makes sense to me. I mean, that's just my guess. That is my hypothesis, but
well,
who knows? No one knows for sure, that's for sure.
It's a good hypothesis, and it kind of, I look at us, the human race, and I see, remember, we tried to do that, I think, with the bees. Remember, we were going to make this better bee that wasn't going to be affected by some kind of mite or whatever it was, and it turned into being the Africanized killer bee. And so,
right.
You know,
that would not be a good thing if that happened to humans, would it?
No, it wouldn't. So I worry about when any species, whether it be ours or another, who play God. But then I kind of wonder, is that role, are they the gods? I mean, have they been doing this all along?
That's a good question. They could be.
Yeah. One might never know. Now, you're convinced that the abduction phenomena is being covered up by the government, and I would agree with you 1,000% on that. But why do you feel that way? I mean, what do you think they know?
Well, first of all, I think it's being covered up because the UFO phenomenon is being covered up. It dates back to January of 1953 when the Robertson panel met, and it was CIA funded, and the Durant report that was an outgrowth of the Robertson panel had made the decision that UFOs were going to be covered up, that the American public was going to be re-educated, programmed to believe that UFOs were not real, to take our interest away from the subject, and the plan that was going to be put into effect was to take people who had had sighting reports that were compelling and to debunk those reports and to make that person feel embarrassed, to make them look silly, and then this would stop other people from making reports. It wasn't very effective, actually. It made people look silly, but people continued to make reports to Project Blue Book. But also, part of the Durant Report's plan was to hire writers and movie makers who would write books and magazine articles and do productions that would debunk the topic of UFOs. So if they're doing that on UFOs, they certainly would be doing that in terms of alien abduction. And in terms of part of the cover-up, many experiencers and also investigators have reported levels of harassment coming their way in terms of phones being tapped, conversations being monitored, computers being hacked into, information being destroyed, that sort of thing, black helicopters hovering over their homes. And, if people report this in public, then a lot of times people are going to say, oh, they're paranoid, they're making this up. So it's sort of a double-edged sword here. Either you speak about it and people say that you're paranoid and imagining it, or you are quiet about it and maybe you suffer as a result of this.
Now, who do you think is actually, I've wondered this recently, I've thought this, and I've said, I wonder who actually is the one who wants it covered up. Is it the government here, on Earth, or is it the ETs, or are they both in cahoots? Because somebody, is making sure we don't know. And I wonder, it's like, well, if the ETs wanted us to know they were there, they, who could stop them? And I'll tell you, it almost seems like they want us to know, because there's been so many sightings, and I myself have had 6 different sightings, 3 of them incredible. So I know that this is a real phenomenon. I have absolutely no doubt about it, and it's intelligent, whatever it is. So, I wonder who's making sure the lid stays on it.
Well, it seems to be stepping up, as you said, and more people are having sightings and close encounters and even reporting their ET contacts. Even if they've kept quiet for many years, they're now in their 50s or their 60s, and they're deciding to come forward to speak about the experiences they've had in a safe environment. Who's responsible for the cover-up? Well, apparently the military is involved in this, and when you think about it, it wasn't just the military, it was also some very prominent scientists, including psychologists, who made the decision back in 1953. And it was based upon the potential public response if the truth were known. And, a lot of people in our society simply would not be able to accept this. They would not be able to go on leading the normal everyday lives that they're leading right now. They would worry about being invaded. They would worry about if their children were going to survive. They'd be worried about enslavement. They'd be worried about disease. They'd be worried about the destruction of the human race. There are all kinds of scenarios that arise in the human mind about what might happen. So there would have to be many, many reassurances that no one would be harmed. On the other side of this, we have the abduction phenomenon. We have individuals who are taken. They have not been given consent to be taken over and over again. They are being used for medical procedures and apparent experiments. And there is absolutely nothing that our government or our military can do to stop this. Why would they ever want to tell the American public or the people throughout the world that this is happening? And sorry, folks, we can't do anything about it. And part of their job is to protect us. They can't protect us from this.
Right, and so now that also leads me to wonder about the ETs themselves. I mean, because this is it's a violation. It's kidnapping. It's, if I was to do that to you and you called the police, I mean, I'd be in prison.
Absolutely. So, what about them, and what about their agenda? Do they want their presence known? From the information I've received, they feel that they're doing it for the greater good. They apologize for frightening us and for what they're doing, but they feel that it is extremely important. Now, there are a number of experiencers, particularly those who have worked with Barbara Lamb, who a long-time researcher and psychotherapist and hypnotherapist, who have stated that they had made an agreement with the ETs to be contacted here on Earth during this lifetime. And that gets into a lot more. That gets into reincarnation. It gets into making a contract prior to birth, prior to life on this planet. Perhaps they were ETs on another planet. So you have all of this complicating this as well. And of course, none of us know what the real answer to this is. But the ETs are not in a position to be showing themselves and to be asking for signed consent. And so they come and they do this, and they're doing it surreptitiously, attempting to cause as little interference in our lives as possible. They try to come when we're sleeping. Unfortunately, many experiencers, about 75% of experiencers, have difficulty sleeping at night because they're fearful that they're going to be taken. And a lot of times, before they are taken, there are signals that come from the ETs that make them know that this is going to be imminent, that this is going to be happening very soon. And so they're awake when they are taken, and they remember part of the experience. Very few remember everything that has occurred, but many do recall being taken, finding themselves on craft, maybe finding themselves on a table without hypnosis. And I found that individuals who have been taken over a lifetime, over and over again, are being permitted to remember more and more without hypnosis. So this is pretty interesting as well, that some people are being trusted with the information.
It is. Now, there's been very interesting I guess theories that people have come up with in the past, and I often ask this when I speak with a guest about abductions, and that is how can, and I've asked the abductees this too, and they're pretty sure, and so that's good enough for me. But how could we be sure that our government's not, whatever alphabet agency's not using some kind of, they're not doing the abduction, and they're filling these thoughts into people's heads, making them think that it was aliens or what have you. And this is a question that comes up a lot, so I thought I'd ask it.
Right. It's all a nefarious governmental group of black ops who are doing terrible things to the citizens of the United States. To me, that would be even worse than being taken by beings from another planet who were curious about us, or who were attempting to save us from self-destruction.
Oh, you're right. I would much rather be abducted by aliens than by our own government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know.
So what have some of the psychological studies on these abductees, what have they said? I mean, you know, when they, because I don't know, I've dealt with some psychologists in my time. I've had them on the show, and I mean, I had one not too long ago who just, I would hate to be his patient, because I mean, he thinks everything is, you know, there's like this something wrong with the brain answer to everything. You know, it's just, it's amazing.
Well, I would hate to be his patient, too. I suppose there are closed-minded, unkind psychologists. I hope he's not a clinical psychologist. I hope that if he is that cruel to others, that he would be an experimental psychologist, at least.
Yeah, he'd be a really bad experience, because anything you said, I mean, it's, you really believe that? It's like, you know, maybe it's not a belief, maybe it's actually happening. I mean, I think everyone should get the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yes, and a lot of people don't do their homework. You know, they make assumptions based upon false information or no information. So it's really important for people, particularly in positions of authority, to have actually done their research on this, have gone to the right sources, and really done, not reading what they can find on the internet, unless it is a good academic study, for example, or a good research study with references. But to go to good sources, not Facebook and not ET sites on the internet, and not debunking sites on the internet. I find so many people just read the debunking sites, particularly professionals. And the information they're receiving is totally incorrect.
And in a lot of cases, they come up first in the search engines. What a surprise!
Oh.
Yeah, so you wind up on these debunking sites, and that's what I was just talking about that the other night. You know, people who, first timers, who say, all right, let me look into this. And they go and they do this little search, and the first couple of things they come up with are absolutely ridiculous. They get turned off to the whole thing. And unfortunately, you know, it really hurts the topic, because, you know, it's a very serious topic, and people like to make light of it. And I say that, you know, no matter what else they're talking about, whether it be the paranormal, the New World Order, it's all connected. And when you talk about this UFO phenomena, it is connected to everything. I mean, I think it's certainly part of the big answer, I think.
Mm-hmm. So. And I have to say that on these sites that do come up with the false information, there certainly must be a reason for that. That there must be a lot of money behind these sites who are paying for these very powerful search engines.
There is.
So that they will come up first and disseminate misinformation to most individuals. I mean, I've read on the internet that Betty and Barney Hill were admitted hoaxers, that Travis Walton was a hoaxer, and absolutely false. I have read an incredible amount of information that I know is absolutely false. That is flat out lies.
Right.
But they're coming up, and people are reading this nonsense.
I think Travis Walton is always one of the first cases I point to, because you're looking at how many different guys? 5 different guys?
Well, there were 7 on the crew.
7. And they all took lie detector tests more
Yes, they
than
took
once.
the lie detector tests. There was one who didn't pass the lie detector test, but he didn't pass because he became angry and he walked out and he didn't complete it. The others took the lie detector test. Questions were asked about whether or not they had harmed Travis, had they killed Travis, but there were also questions asked about, did they see a UFO? Did they think that this UFO took Travis? That sort of thing. And they passed. And the one that had walked out initially, so failed it for that reason, went back later and took it and passed. So all of these men and Travis himself have passed these lie detector tests. Travis had a problem on the first one, but it is because a polygraph exam measures perspiration, it measures respiration, that kind of thing. When you have a person who's taking a polygraph test who is so traumatized, like Travis was, they're certainly going to show signs that they're lying through perspiration and respiration, rapid heartbeat, but it's because they're traumatized, that they're completely stressed out, not because they're lying. Travis went back and took several other polygraph exams and passed with no evidence of deception.
Yeah, and for all these guys to pass these lie detector tests, I mean, I could see one guy maybe being good and fooling it, but you're not going to get all these guys able to pass these tests. I mean, I don't see it as a possibility. And so I look at that story as one of those, unless you can absolutely prove to me that it's a lie, I 100% believe that Travis Walton was abducted. And I've talked to Steve Pierce. I've talked to some of the other guys. I've not yet talked to Travis. So maybe one of these days I can get him on and talk about it. But that story never gets old to me. Just like your aunt and uncle's story. I mean, these are credible stories, and people go out of their way to make them look foolish for that reason. Because
And not just to make them look foolish. When I look at the Travis Walton case, and I have done a lot of investigation on this case. I know Travis. He's stayed at my house before. I see him generally whenever I travel to speak at a conference. So I've had ample opportunity to talk with him. I have been out there. I've walked on the site where this happened, and I've read all of the archival records on it, including Phil Klass's records on this. And I am with Travis 100%, and I'm very, very concerned that Philip Klass and others did all that they could to destroy Travis's life. He didn't ask for this experience to happen. He didn't want this to happen. It was made public because he was missing and being sought after, and the men that he worked with were under suspicion of having murdered him. So that's how this case became so well known. It wasn't him stepping out and saying, "Look, this happened to me." His brother tried to hide him away after, rapidly took him out of Snowflake and down to Phoenix, just to get him away from the media. So, and Travis lost opportunities in his life that he might have had if he hadn't had this experience. And in large part, it was the result of some very nasty individuals who were pulling the strings to try to make his life miserable.
Yeah, that's true. And Steve Pierce told me about the guy who tried to pay him off to say that it was a hoax. And I mean, yeah, people really went out of their way to try to, cover it up. And that's why, people, here we are, we're being distracted by all these petty things, race and religions and these wars, and when we should be looking to the stars, because that's where the answers are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, the person who offered to pay him $10,000 was Philip Klass, and I've been to the archival collection. I have seen the transcript of a conversation between Steve Pierce and Philip Klass, and Philip Klass did say to Steve, if you can give me evidence that will prove that this is a hoax, I will give you $10,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so I can verify that Steve is not making that up. It was a discussion, and it's in Phil Klass's archival record. But Steve had to be able to not just say it was a hoax, but to prove it.
Oh, okay. So he would have had to prove it, and
he would have to have evidence, submit evidence.
And for a good number of people, it doesn't take much. You just put anything out there, and they just still believe it. It's it's a shame if people they don't do enough of their own research. They'll just look at the first thing that comes up. Oh, it's a hoax, yeah, because so and so said so. But when it's not. So back to these psychological studies done on these abductees.
Yes.
How did some of these go? I mean, what kind of results did they get from them? I mean, what did the psychologists themselves, how did they feel about it? I mean, did they get a good feel on whether somebody was, did they try to say they were all crazy, I guess, or did they say, hey, we got something here?
Well, in most cases, these were academic studies where the participants underwent interviews and took a number of screenings to determine whether or not they had psychological aberrations, whether or not they had personality disorders, whether or not they were fantasy prone. And what they discovered, all of these researchers, in the end, is that those who had the characteristics of individuals who had a real abduction experience were no more fantasy prone or psychologically disturbed than the general population. Of course, there's going to be a small percentage of individuals who are delusional, who might have a major mental illness, who will believe that they're having these experiences, but they're deluded, they're not. But those who do have evidence that this is happening, who are psychologically normal, are not showing characteristics that would make us believe that we should not believe them. They're just normal, average, everyday people. They might be experiencing some anxiety over what has happened to them. They might have some traumatic stress over what they have been through, which is absolutely normal for people who have been through this kind of experience, particularly if they found it to be very, very frightening. There was a slightly elevated level of fantasy proneness among some of the experiencers who participated in these studies. But if you look at the fantasy prone scale as it was written, one of the characteristics of being fantasy prone on this scale is that you feel that you are psychic or intuitive. Well, we know through our research that 88% of the experiencers who participated in the study I did with Denise Stoner in 2012 stated that they did have increased psychic ability after these abduction experiences. That's part of the phenomenon. It isn't that they're fantasy prone, it's real. And they can demonstrate that this is real.
Well, I would assume that after going through something like that, you might come off to somebody else as though you're in a little bit of fantasy land. But, for that person, I doubt that any of it's fantasy at all. And it's, I've been, evaluating a lot of this stuff through the years now, I come to the determination that, like with ghost stories, whether it be hauntings or whatever, 95% of the people are telling you the truth. Now, are all the cases actual ghosts? Probably not. I'm sure a lot of them could be explained. But 95% of them are telling you the truth. They really had some kind of weird experience. And then you get 5% who just make it up because they want to be popular or whatever. And I think you
about
get
this percentage in ET sightings, ET contact experiences, and UFO sightings. A very small percentage of individuals are hoaxes. And, but the majority are telling the truth. Sometimes there are perceptual problems. Sometimes people make mistakes. But, maybe that's another 20% or so. But there is a core group of very solid individuals who are having these experiences, who have evidence, who would be believed on any other subject. I have interviewed in confidence, taken reports from former military officers, airline pilots, medical doctors, people who have good reputations in the community, who certainly would never want their identities revealed. But these solid citizens are reporting these very strange occurrences. I have no reason to doubt what they say.
Yeah, and that's how I kind of play it out here too. Is I'll get I've had abductees on the show, and of course I always ask if they have any proof, because who knows? Maybe one of these times you'll get lucky and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I have the finger I bit off" or something, But so far that's not been the case. But I believe most of them. I think that something's happened to them all, and of course I always ask them if they're on any medications and stuff. It's common questions because you have to ask.
Yes, yeah, that's part of what MUFON does in a MUFON investigation. We need to know if individuals are on medications that might cause hallucinations, or if they're on medications because they have hallucinations and the medication is preventing this from occurring. So that's normal questioning when you're doing an investigation.
Right.
You need to find out if there are other explanations for this. Though my attitude toward it is that only the experiencer can determine whether or not the experience is real. I don't live in their body, and I don't know what is going on in their household. They can set up cameras. They can set up motion-activated infrared cameras throughout their household. They can record in a diary their memories of everything that they remember in detail. And I tell people to do it right away, because oftentimes these memories slip out as time goes on.
But
they can check their bodies for marks that were not there the previous day. And it's this sort of thing. Look for fluorescence by going into a dark room with a black light to see if you have fluorescence on your body. That's another characteristic that we see among experiencers.
Yeah, you mentioned the cameras, and I love the idea. Now, haven't people done that, and then for some reason, when they're being abducted, the cameras turn into fuzz, and then they come back on, or something? I mean, it's like...
But let me tell you, this is very interesting, because what happens is, and I love game cameras, people, because the photographs are numbered and dated, and there can be no evidence of hoaxing here. You can't remove one frame and insert another or anything like that. So you set the camera up, and this is what I have observed. The covers will lift up at a particular time of night, and the camera will shut off. And then 2 hours later, approximately, you see the covers go up again, not all of it, just the part up at the top where the person's head would be. And then the person is in bed, the two people are in bed, you can see some movement, and the camera turns back on again. Now, if you look at that, but you also look at the movements during the night, you might see a movement on that camera every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes. You might see people getting up. During that 2-hour period, nothing occurs, and it appears that the camera is shut down. That's the kind of evidence that I get. I've gotten a photograph of what might be an ET sort of materializing in a room. This is highly unusual. There appears to be sort of an energy field above this being. It's only one shot. So, who knows? I don't know if it's that or if it's something else that is causing this to occur on the camera.
I have seen some pretty wild videos, a couple of them that were shared with me from YouTube, where it looked like some Russian military concentration type camp, and these ETs were supposed to be captured in it, and that's the closest I've come to seeing film footage. But it looks so darn real, but it's so hard to know now because everybody has like NASA technology at their fingertips now.
That is true, and I cannot take anything that I see on YouTube seriously because there are so many people who are very clever at producing false photographs, and I have to know the witness. It has to be a case that I've been investigating for a long period of time, or in a MUFON case, if I feel that it's compelling, I might have a photo analyst take a look at it. But if people want us to believe of what they're posting on YouTube, then I think that it should undergo photo analysis, that they should submit to an investigation.
I agree, and if they get caught fudging it, then they should have to pay for it. You shouldn't be putting fake stuff out there just to, and telling people it's real. It's a shame because that's how I am. I mean, I have to know the source. I have to trust that source, and it's really hard to get me there. So, I've got a few people who send me stuff, and I believe them because I know they wouldn't make it up. But somebody, Johnny Fireshot or something on YouTube, I mean, you don't know who he is, and you always ask him, well, where's the source this? Well, I got it from Before It's News or this place or that place, and I don't know, I'm like you, I have to know the source.
They're the same types of people who would be hoaxing UFO stories, generally immature men.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, there are some who say that alien abduction could be explained, or at least, now they say some, and when you say some, I say, okay, then why are we even talking about it? But they say some could be explained away by nothing more than sleep paralysis. Like, I don't know. They say that about out-of-body experiences, too, and I've had a few of those, and I promise you it was not, I wasn't sleeping when it happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me say about sleep paralysis. First, there's a research article on my website at Kathleen-Marden, MARDEN.com, which explains all of this in detail, including hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations. But sleep paralysis is a normal part of our sleep. It is to protect us from harming ourselves and others during the sleep state so that we're not acting out our dreams. Now, sometimes there is a little problem between waking and sleeping where you're awake but your body is still in this state of paralysis that you have during REM sleep. And in this state, you might see shadows. You're more prone to become panicky. or frightened when you see the shadows, because your mind is still a little bit into the dream state, into REM sleep. And you might even have hallucinations. This could happen. It's just part of the sleep state, and it happens to some people. However, it's different than what occurs in alien abduction or ET contact, whatever you want to say. I don't want to say abduction exclusively, because many people feel that they're being visited, and they don't mind having this occur. So anyway, in this, when it's real, people are developing very complicated scenarios about what is going on. First of all, there's no paralysis. They might be awake when this occurs, and then the paralysis sets in when they're attempting to escape, or they're yelling out, or something is happening to them. And then the paralysis occurs, and then they find themselves flying through their room, out through a closed window or a wall or the ceiling.
But, I mean, it's, for me, when I had an out-of-body experience, I knew I wasn't dreaming. I knew I wasn't. I could see my body, and you know, but the people ask you that, and you know, some people second guess it. I guess for me, there was no second guessing. I knew that something strange. I didn't know what at the time. I was just a kid, but as I got older, I realized what was going on. So, you know, I guess you could have nightmares like that, but I would think you would know, wouldn't you? Wouldn't most people know? I mean, don't you just know?
Yes, I think that most people do know, and those who have sleep paralysis experiences have them over and over again throughout their lifetime. If they do see anything that looks like an ET, it would be part of an ET's body. It might be a head just floating. It's generally not an entire body like experiencers see when ETs come into their bedroom. It has a different quality to it. You know, so it is, we are able to differentiate between this. The problem, as I see it, is that mainstream science will not accept anything outside our current scientific paradigm. And this is materialistic science. So if it doesn't fit, you know, and ET contact does not fit, according to our current scientific paradigms, it's impossible for matter to pass through matter.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you know, mainstream science, I won't say I've absolutely given up on them. I mean, they're useful, I guess, for some things, but for the most part, I don't even pay attention to it that much anymore, because you know, they fudge data on things. They're the type that push puzzle pieces in spots they don't fit, and then they accept it, because if they can't measure it, it can't possibly be real. And so, you know, I go with experience. I think experience is the best when it comes to these topics. And so, talking to people who have experienced what they have, and me being blessed to have sightings, you know, so that told me, I believed in it before that, but then having the sightings, it did so much for me. It's like, well, now I have no doubt. And I'm at a point in my life now where I don't care if anyone else believes. If you don't, you know, good for you. If you want to make excuses for what you might have seen, fine. It's all I can tell you is what I seen was intelligent, and it was being controlled by intelligence. And, you know, who was driving it? I don't know. But unless they could show me a driver's license, I'm going to guess it's not from any airport around here. I mean, it just couldn't have been. But Kathleen, we've got to take a break. So why don't...
And I'm loving the show tonight. And I wanted to bring up the idea, just food for thought. I was looking at a UFO Digest article recently. It was trying to find common elements among UFO abductees. And I haven't researched this all this much, but they mentioned that all the abductees in the group that they examined all had Rh negative blood types. And when you look at the current science on human blood groups, it's absolutely fascinating. I used to think there were just 7 blood groups for humans. And then I went to looking into this, and Smithsonian Magazine has a pretty good article about it, about the history of human blood groups. And they cite more than 20 human blood groups. And then you look at the International Society of Blood Transfusion, and they're talking about 35 human blood groups that scientists are now have now isolated. Some of them are based on interaction between humans and disease, and then some of them are based on vulnerability to other genetic weaknesses. And it's a fascinating thing to look at. But I was wanting to ask Kathleen if she knew of any studies of abductees and blood type factors, because when you look at the global distribution of all these different human blood types, it sure does look like a long-running lab experiment.
Yes, the research that you're talking about sounds fascinating, and I am aware of some studies that have asked that question. In fact, the commonality study that Denise Stoner and I completed in the year 2012 did ask that question. And what we discovered was that there is an elevated level of Rh negative blood among experiencers. Some experiencers also have Rh positive blood, but there's an elevated level among experiencers, and that is very interesting to me.
It really is. The article also mentioned that the abductees had a common element of a higher cognitive ability following the abduction, so
yes,
that would play in with this increased psyche.
Yes, that is true. Many experiencers have reported an increase in their intelligence after they have had these experiences. Experiencers tend to be more empathic, more intuitive, more psychic. Some have been given the gift of healing. There are some amazing abilities that some experiencers have acquired.
Excellent. Well, if I find anything else on this, are you interested in me sending it to you?
Sure, if you'd like to send the link to me, if you can find studies that involve all of those 35 different types of blood types, that would be very interesting to me. Okay,
I'll shoot it to you, and I'm glad you took my what sounded initially as maybe a crazy theory seriously.
Well, thank you for
Thanks,
the call.
Thanks, Kathleen.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thanks for taking my call. Y'all have a good night.
All right, you too. You betcha. And so, yeah, interesting. You know, I hear about these different races and different blood types, and for me, I guess you look at the vast universe, and you got to imagine there's probably all kinds of races, and you know, how many millions of years in advance might some be, and some people laugh at that, but the fact is some like to look at us as like we're the most advanced, we're the best that there is, and I don't think so. I think that I know not, as a matter of fact. I think that there's been civilizations that have been around a lot longer than us. So, I mean, you look at what we've done in the last 200 years, technology-wise, just what they tell us about. So you can imagine what another race has been able to do that's been around for, say, a few 100,000 years, with this type of technologies.
Absolutely, and you have to think, if they have developed the technology to be able to travel from there to here, and they have not exterminated themselves in the process, they've come pretty far.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and that's the challenge here is with human beings is we seem like, we are self-destructive. We do everything that we shouldn't be doing. You're looking at a race that has, let's see what happens when we blow up an atomic bomb. Well, it might take the whole world out, but let's try it anyways. I mean, that's the kind of civilization we are, or type of people we are,
and oftentimes the scientists will think, well, there could be a very benevolent and useful purpose for this, and then it ends up being militarized and it's used for a destructive purpose. So it's unfortunate, but it happens.
You know, Kathleen, I think that's how it goes with everything. I think, like, people will talk about weather modification and these different technologies, and I say, I bet all this stuff was, good intentions. And, of course, the good intentions paved the road to hell. And I think that's what happens with a lot of it. They say, yeah, we'll fund it. You're doing a great job. And when they see results, they say, okay, now you're going to sign this over to us. We're going to militarize it. And you're going to be quiet.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I thought maybe while we were talking, well, first off, you actually wrote a book with Stanton Freeman, didn't you?
2 books.
More than one.
Yes, we've written 2 books together. We're working on a third right now, actually. Yes, the first book was Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. I wrote most of that, actually. Stan wrote 2 chapters and the foreword for that book. He also reviewed my work, which was very helpful to me. I wanted to make sure that it was accurate and unbiased. And then we went on to write another book, Science Was Wrong, and that was about the history of science over the past 125, well, more than that now, probably 150 to 175 years, and how some very well-educated, powerful, politically connected, oftentimes scientists made proclamations of impossibility, and they were wrong. And sometimes there were social consequences, sometimes people died. In the end, they were proven wrong. They destroyed the lives and the careers of other individuals who were right. So it's sort of what has happened in the field of ufology, but there are many, many examples in our book about other areas of science. We also wrote in that book about UFOs, alien abductions, and also the academic studies on telepathy that have been conducted in universities that are very fascinating.
Incredible. And yeah, I have the book Science Was Wrong. I've had Stanton on the show several times. Always loved talking to him. And so yeah, when I seen it, I recognized it. I saw at the time when I interviewed him, I didn't realize that the two of you did it together, and I was thinking, boy, it would have been nice to have you both on together tonight. But
yes, we each wrote 7 chapters in that book. Each of us wrote half of it.
Fantastic. Now, it says here that I guess you were a primary witness to the evidence of the UFO encounter, the aftermath, and so could you tell me more about that? I mean, did you actually see UFOs? Give us a little more. I mean, like you're about the closest person to the Betty and Barney Hill story that I've spoken to. So I definitely would like to hear as much as you'd be willing to share with me about it.
Yes, and you asked me if I have actually been a witness to UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote in Captured about further sightings that Betty had when she was doing a series of experiments with a team of scientists. These were contact experiments to try to call in a UFO, for it to come in and land in a particular location. And during this time frame, and this is after the hypnosis, it started in about 1965 and continued on for a number of years. And I wrote in Captured about one time when a group of family members and one of our neighbors went to a pond near my childhood home. This neighbor had been walking home from visiting the family, and had seen a UFO. And we collected her, and we went out, and we all had a close encounter with this craft. At times it was close, at times it was way up in the sky. It flew in an unconventional pattern. It dropped vertically down toward the lake, rocking back and forth in what we used to call a falling leaf pattern. It then traveled in a straight line over to another side of the small lake and met another craft. We all piled into the car and drove toward it, got out of the car, and we didn't see them. So we're looking for them. Most of us were looking toward one part of the lake. My mother was looking toward the other side of the lake. We were standing on a bridge that connected two islands, the mainland to an island, I should say. And my mother saw these two crafts hovering just above the lake. This was February of the year, and they were just hovering there. And as she watched them, one of them shot a beam out that came out toward her slowly. It wasn't as if you'd turned on a flashlight. It started coming out slowly toward her, and there seemed to be some kind of like a funnel shape, almost with an energy inside of it, and it hit her. And that is when she screamed, and we went running to her. And, I don't know if we were abducted, if she was abducted, or or what this was all about, but we hightailed it out of there after that, arriving home later than anticipated, I can say that. After that experience, just a couple of months later, a craft was seen landing on my grandparents' farm. And we had a neighbor who was a commercial pilot. He was returning home from work, and the craft seemed to be coming in to land. His son called my brother the following morning and reported this to us. We called my grandparents. I grew up across the street from their home. This would have happened maybe 500 feet from my bedroom. And my grandmother was up during the night. It woke her up as it was coming in. And she saw it come in for a landing, and was very frightened, woke my grandfather up. It's a funny thing that my grandmother had said to my Aunt Betty, well, if they do come in and land, just tell them to come knock on the door, and then I'll serve them coffee. So what actually happened was my grandmother heard these measured knocks on the front door, and was really terrified at that point, because she was only kidding, obviously. My grandmother and grandfather were very frightened. They tried to find a prosaic explanation for all of this. They could not. Went back to bed. I don't know if they slept that night, but the next morning, my brothers and I went out, and we found some physical trace evidence. There were trees that were all splayed out in a circular pattern. These were birch trees, small sapling-type birch trees.
Was it similar to like a crop circle, how they'd be laid out like that?
Sort of. Well, they weren't. I don't remember them being lapped over each other.
Okay.
I don't know. I've been looking for the photographs that were taken of them, and I have not found those photographs. They might be in Betty's collection at the University of New Hampshire, so I'm not sure, but I have not found the photographs yet. We did find some landing evidence on the ground, too, some markings where apparently legs came down, 3 of them, from the bottom of this craft. And there was an area in the sand that appeared to be burned or almost glass-like as well in the center of this. So that was very interesting, too. There's a possibility that family members were taken that night when it landed, and a possibility that I might have been taken that night.
Ooh. Now, what about What about like regression? Had you ever gone through any regression, hypnotherapy type stuff to see if anything came up?
Yes, I have. And I say possibility because that information was brought out through hypnosis. However, I have had conscious recall of events that happen periodically throughout my lifetime. And I also do have what I believe is an implant in front of my left ear in my face. It reacts to a magnet. And recently I was demonstrating to a group of experiencers how to conduct their own investigation of their evidence. And I had talked about this little device that I thought it was in my face. And so I had magnetic hematite. I had a nice big piece of it, and I put it over the magnet, and I was demonstrating what they should do. And I had a microphone in the other hand. And all of a sudden, that piece of whatever it is, that implant, I think, started jumping up and down in my face, almost like it was on a trampoline, bouncing up and down. And I heard a very, very loud buzzing sound in my head. Very interesting. I think that was confirmation that it actually is an implant.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, I know Roger Lear, who is no longer with us, he used to specialize in that area. Had you ever talked to him about checking it out, or?
I hadn't found it when Roger was alive.
Oh, well, see, now that's a whole other ballgame now.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have it removed either. I believe that it's there for a purpose.
I don't think you'd be able to.
Probably a positive purpose.
I don't think you'd be able to. It's my understanding when you go to get these things, they move.
Well, they do move, and they are difficult to get out. And I think that some of these implants monitor the health of the human body. I think that they're used for communication, and I would never want to remove one because I think that there are positive reasons for them being there.
Well, hey, if it is one, then you've got a closer connection to these other people than a lot of us do. So I wouldn't mind having that connection. I'd love to talk to them. If one, I'll tell you, if a ship came down and I had a close call with one a few years back, and I proved to myself that I wouldn't be afraid. I'm like a kid on Christmas. I want them to land, get out, let's have a conversation, because I have a lot of questions. But we have a call. We have 585 area code, and I believe this is Bruce in Rochester, New York. Bruce, hello.
How are you, Mike?
I was right.
I'm enjoying the show immensely.
Thank you.
And I'd like to ask Kathleen Marden a question.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, Kathleen, I had procured your book called The Alien Abduction Files that you wrote with Denise Stoner a few years back.
Yes, in 2013.
Yeah, excellent book, by the way.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it very much. Now, as I recall, one of the chapters in there had to do with serial abductions. Now, when you talk about serial abductions, do you know how many times any particular abductees that you have dealt with have been, let's say, abducted? Multiple times. Is there any empirical data related to that showing how often certain people have been abducted?
There is some data in the form of questionnaires that people have completed. In the questionnaire that Denise and I did, we asked how many times they thought they had been abducted, but the top figure we used was over 10 times, and the majority of individuals felt that they had been taken more than 10 times, and the statistics are in the Alien Abduction Files. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. There's a new study that has more than 1,000 participants, and that is being done by the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. And some of the early statistics I found in there, I believe the question went up to more than 20 times. And and many people thought that too. Well, this seems to happen periodically throughout a person's lifetime. 36% of those who participated in my study thought that they had been taken for the first time when they were less than 5 years old, and taken maybe once a year or once every few months when they were children. During the reproductive years, they tend to be taken more often, and then after those years end, they might be taken once a year or once every 5 years sometimes.
So it's actually...
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's actually possible that some of these abductees that have been taken at very young ages, maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, that they have been taken even when they get up into their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're still being abducted?
Yes, periodically. They're taken.
Yeah. I had no idea.
You're from upstate New York. There are...
Yes, how did you know that?
You said Rochester.
Oh, Michael did, yes.
Yes. So anyway, I have interviewed a number of men from upstate New York who were farm boys who were taken as children from the farm and have been revisited throughout their lifetime. Very interesting. There's one who has very compelling evidence as well.
Right. Now, see, my thought on it was you got abducted maybe once or twice and that was it. But you're saying upwards of even 20, possibly more than that times, and that just boggles my mind.
It's pretty hard to wrap your head around, isn't it?
Yes. Now, do these people, as they talk to you and give you data, do they recall all of these episodes, or does it come back to them strictly under the influence of hypnotism?
Most experiencers have some recall of their contact experiences. Yeah, it might be an awareness of beings in their room and being taken out. And some of them will remember waking up on a table on the craft. Most people don't have a full memory of what has occurred, but I have found many individuals now who are in their 50s and 60s who are being allowed to have more conscious recall than they have ever had before. I don't know what's going on there, but
that's amazing.
Some are also being given information that they've never been given before as well.
Yeah, really amazing. And Kathleen, you basically answered my question when I recalled that one chapter about serial abductions. I was wondering, well, how many times does this go on for certain people? And I think you're showing me right now that it's substantial.
Yes, it is. And I've asked experiencers why they think that this is happening, and I've received the same answer over and over again, that it seems to be that the ETs are interested in their health, and that sometimes they're taken and given upgrades to keep them healthy, because maybe it's difficult to pass that human body through walls to deconstruct the atomic structure and then reconstruct it again, if that's what is occurring. And physicists have told me that that's what they believe is occurring. So they want to make sure that the humans that they've worked with remain healthy, if they can.
Yeah, so they're following them along as they age.
Yes.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, Kathleen, I really appreciate taking the time to answer my question, and I'm going to let you get back with Michael and LNM. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thanks for calling in.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
Okay.
Always great to hear back from home, my friend. So thank you very much. I'm from Rochester, New York. Matter of fact, I just came back from there. I went and visited for a few days, and the weather was so much nicer than the 100 degrees we're dealing with here in the Carolinas right now. So
that's pretty warm. It was 99 today here in Florida.
Oh, geez. Yeah, we've had it really good here since March. It's been, the weather has been like, I call it a Rochester, New York summer. It's just been really nice, comfortable temperatures, breezy, beautiful. And then now it's turned its evil little head over to fire. And so... But I did want, you mentioned the implants, and I think, and you said about the health, and it reminds me again of us, the human race, and what we do, say, in our oceans, how we'll go out, we'll capture a dolphin, we'll put an implant on him, a tag or whatever, and let him go in the ocean, and we track him, and, and then maybe later we find him and bring him aboard again, It's kind of funny how we have so much similarities.
I know. Where do you think they got that idea from?
Yeah, I often wonder. I do. Well, Kathleen, we've got to take one last break here, and then I will ask Kathleen Marden. And so, Kathleen, we are back, and what I usually like to do here before we finish up, and we've got about another half hour to go, is I like to give you the floor to get out anything that you like. But before I even go there, I had read somewhere today, I think it was on your website, I had read where you had felt that maybe Betty's scientific contact experiments had led to your memories of contact. And I found that a little bit interesting, and I thought maybe if you could touch on that briefly.
Yes, I just spoke about that when I was talking about the experience where the craft landed on my grandparents' farm.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that, perhaps Betty thought that she was just calling in these ETs, but that perhaps they thought she was inviting them to meet the rest of the family as well.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, see, I was getting it mixed up. I'm sorry. Okay, so, and we have a call. We've got James. James, welcome to Late Night in the Midlands. You are on with Kathleen. Welcome. Hello?
How you doing, Michael?
Hey, good. How are you? Good.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, you're fine. We can hear you just fine. Welcome aboard, James.
Okay.
Yep, you got.
How you doing, Kathleen? You remember me?
Go ahead.
You said hi to me at Contact in the Desert. You remember me, right?
James from Contact in the Desert.
I see you all the time.
Pardon me? Yes.
Yeah, I seen you in Roswell. You, my homie. Remember, I'm from Boston. You remember me?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So what's on your mind?
I found out. I basically figured out that I'd been abducted when I went to Roswell. That's when I actually met Kathleen. Back then, the alien hunter had showed me that gray to human eye-to-eye photograph, and that's what set me off. It kind of triggered me, and that's when I started checking into it. I basically figured out I had been abducted. But I kind of knew all along that I'd been abducted at age 4. But I've always felt that my blue eyes had something to do with my abduction. Have you run into that at all?
Something about your eyes? No. But, Daryl, the alien hunter, was showing a photograph of ET communication with humans where they put their eyes very close to ours, and we receive a message, telepathic message in our head, or sometimes images, and that's the way they communicate with us, through eye contact oftentimes.
Yeah, that's the photo that I reacted to. Did you hear he fell from an attic the other day?
Oh my
He
goodness!
didn't get hurt. He's lucky. The doctor said that someone's watching over him. He said, "Well, it's not an alien." Yeah, he fell 12 feet down through the sheetrock. I guess he landed on his feet. Just a couple scratches. He's all right. He's doing fine.
Good.
So,
No, that's good. That's good.
Yvonne Smith actually. Yeah, Yvonne Smith actually has found that it's 90% that abductees are psychic, and that compares with your research of 88%. So that's like spot on there. I brought that question up with her when I went to my first group with her.
Yes, the statistic I had in my research study with Denise Stoner in 2012 was that 88% had developed psychic ability after contact.
Okay, one other question. Daryl Sims actually says 90%. What do you feel is the percentage of human abduction? What do you think the percentage is of people that have been abducted?
You're saying that Daryl says that 90% of the population of the Earth has been contacted?
Yeah, that's what he says. Yes,
I'm going to have to talk to him. I'm going to see him in 2 weeks at Roswell again, and I'll have to talk to him about that statistic and where he got that from. I have to tell you that I used to think that the figure was inflated. And when it came out that 3.7 million Americans felt that they had been abducted, this is going back to the Roper poll that Bud Hopkins and others participated in a few years back. I thought that was inflated. I couldn't imagine how so many people could have been taken. But boy, my eyes have been opened wide. In the past year, I have received over 1,000 reports from experiencers through the Mutual UFO Network. People have gone to MUFON, their website, and have taken the experiencer questionnaire that is under research. And that is a huge number of people. Just who are finding that questionnaire, taking it in order to talk to a member of MUFON's experiencer research team who is going to be non-judgmental and listen to their story and try to help them out. So imagine what percentage of the population it is if over 1,000 have gone to the effort to search out that information and complete that questionnaire in the past year. It has to be astronomical.
Yeah, it would. Go ahead, James.
That would have been 90% myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
What's that?
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry. We've got a bad delay for some reason, so I don't think any of us are trying to talk over each other. Yeah.
No, it's my buddies. I can hear it when I called you. I can hear it. It can hear the ring. The ring changes to another ring. It's like they're recording all my calls all the time. It's that 1972 stuff all over again. Well, thanks a lot, Kathleen.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling.
Next year, I'll still place out. If you're going to be in Leominster this year, I'll see you there. You take it easy, Michael.
All right. Thank you, James. I appreciate the call. I do. You had mentioned something that was very interesting to me. It kind of caught my attention. You said that the ETs sometimes will put their eyes close to a person's eyes and pass like a picture or something in their head. And that's kind of, it's strange to me because it's almost the same thing you hear about with, like I had a ghostly experience and the visitation I had, that's exactly how that spirit on the other side communicated with me by putting pictures and things in my head. There was no words. And I hear countless accounts of people who have had paranormal experiences, like connections with somebody from the other side. And that's how, that information rolled to them. And so I see that with E.T., and that's kind of, I just see a similarity. And then the walls, too. You mentioned about the E.T.s, and I've heard people say, well, the E.T.s, the little grays, came through my wall. Well, if they could do that, ghosts can do that. I'm seeing a lot of similarities between, this whole ghostly experience and these extraterrestrials.
There are a lot of similarities, and some people think that there are no differences. I believe that there are some differences. I have been researching that, but there are many similarities as well. The question is, we know that ghosts are interdimensional beings, that they can slip in and out of our environment. The question is, are some ETs physical beings coming here from other planets who have developed the technology that causes them to be able to create invisibility, to be able to take apart atoms and reconstruct them? Or is all of this interdimensional? And is that how all of this is being done? Are they all residing in other dimensions close to Earth, but we simply cannot see them? It is such a huge mystery, and it really drives me to look for more answers.
It is. When you think about it and give it thought, like I'm actually doing right now, and it just makes me want to bang my head against the wall. It's like, are the ghosts the ETs? Are the ETs the ghosts? Or had the ETs figured out the way of a technology of some sort that could put them on the realm of the ghost? Or, there's just so many questions, and we really need one of these beings to come down and have a seat. I'm sure they have already, just not with you and I. Somebody's probably interviewed one somewhere, I would assume. Dead or alive, I'm sure. But it's amazing to me, the similarities. And I don't know, it makes me, can we even trust when we're visited from the other side now? These are the questions that it brings up. And I just think that's so unfair. And, it's like total violation. Well, I want to meet an ET. I also want to scold one. With all your technology, you've got to know. It's like we can sense a good dog from a bad dog, right? Can't they sense a good human from a bad human? And, some of us, I think, I'd like to know, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would like to know. I want to know if any of our prisoners have been locked up, or have been taken while they were locked up. Occasionally I'll receive a letter from someone who is in prison who's trying to convince me that they really didn't commit that murder, that they were abducted and taken out through that open door. Of course, I don't believe that. That's not the way it's done. But I wonder, are only good people being taken? Or are they taking people who commit horrific crimes as well? Another question.
That is another good question, and then that would lead me to wonder, well, am I really a bad person because they haven't taken me yet that I know of now? Now, I've had sightings, and like I got to tell you about this quickly. We had the listeners have heard this probably a million times, but I'm going to tell you. We had I'll give you the short version. We had a mothership basically come over our home here in Columbia, South Carolina. This thing was about the size of a football field. It could have been more than that. I was so excited. This thing was huge. If I had got up, say, I don't know, 80 feet in the air on a ladder, I probably could have threw a rock at this thing. It was about right level with the treetops as it went by, and it blocked out a good portion of the sky. It looked like three tubular objects, and they were fluorescent orange. they shined no light to the ground whatsoever. So there was no light literally coming off of them and shining on anything, reflecting on anything. It made no noise. The colors were absolute brilliant. They looked like colors trapped within colors. They were like it was inside of other colors. I never seen nothing like it. And in between there was darkness. And as I think back about it, I remember not being able to see any stars or anything in between, where those black areas were. And so this thing was huge. It had a very, very brilliant white light coming out of the back of it. But again, not shining on anything. It's like it contained its own light, its own energy. And it went just sailing across the sky. It wasn't in no hurry or anything like that. Just moved right along. I ran under it for a few seconds, and then it disappeared over the treetops. And thankfully, my wife came out of the house and in time to see it too. So I wasn't the only crazy one. There was two of us.
What shape was it?
It looked like four tubes. They were tubular shaped. And then in between each tube there was something connecting them in between each one of them.
So did it end up being square when you put all of those tubes together? Were they connected?
When you put them all together, it almost had like it almost shaped like a football field. It was square, but the front of it looked more like a hot dog would look. I mean, it's like it came to that dome. Kind of like, but yeah, it was about shaped like a football field, so it was kind of squarish.
Yeah, square or rectangle.
Yeah, and who knows? It could probably change its shape anytime it wanted to. I would assume, because it looked like all energy. I mean, it wasn't. It was intelligently controlled, and what gets me to this day is I looked and followed the newspapers and all that. Nobody reported anything. I was the only one, and I'm thinking, do they, choose who sees them and who doesn't? I don't know.
Did you look at the National UFO Reporting Center and on MUFON to see if anyone reported it?
I did, but I didn't look at it until months later. Shame on me. And when I did, I went back to that date, and there was several sightings that sounded similar to mine. So it would appear that other people had seen them, but I guess, I'd love to talk to some of these people, that's for sure, to compare notes. I mean, what did they see compared to what I seen? But that was the most amazing one that I've ever seen. And I've also saw the metallic type, the Jetsons type, where it has the dome on the top, dome on the bottom, and a disc in the middle. I've seen that type too. So, what are these things? Where are they coming from? Amazing. And I tend to think that they're not all coming from the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyways, that's my whole experience. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you the floor to get out anything that you'd like to. Any information at all, anything you've got coming up, feel free. And we'll keep you linked up over on LateNightInTheMidlands.com and take your time. I'm not rushing you off, but I really appreciate you taking time with us tonight.
Well, it was a pleasure being with you. And I just want to tell the listeners that if you visit my website at Kathleen, with a K, Marden, MARDEN.com, you can go to my events for this year. But briefly, I'll tell you I'm going to be speaking in Roswell, doing several lectures and a panel discussion there over the 4th of July weekend. In August, the last weekend in August, I'm going to be speaking at the Experiencers Speak conference in Portland, Maine. This is a really important conference because it is devoted primarily to experiencers who are going to be lecturing and speaking to the public. Stanton Friedman is not an experiencer, but he will be there. He will be sharing a vendor table with me. Denise Stoner, who is my co-author in the Alien Abduction Files, will be there presenting information about her life story as well. In the first part of September, over Labor Day weekend, I have the Exeter UFO Festival. I'll be speaking the first part of October in near Tampa, Florida. It will be on my website. I'll also be at the MUFON International Symposium in September out in Irvine, California, where I'll be doing some training sessions and also some experiencer sessions, experiencer workshops for people who have had these experiences. And then looks like in December I'm going to be down in Brazil. So that's what I have on the schedule right now. You can see it there. You can also purchase autographed copies of my books on my website. And there are many free articles that I've written that you can read as well, and some links to some other very good sites.
Fantastic. Sounds like you're a very, very busy person.
I am, and I love it. I enjoy the traveling and the lecturing and meeting the public, hearing their stories. So, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, there's nothing.
Wonderful retirement job.
Well, yeah, I imagine it would be. See, so you retire and then you finally get the job you love the most. See how that works? So, well, hey, you keep up the great work, and I thank you again for joining us. So let me ask you one more thing before I let you go. How close now for you and I guess we could definitely say disclosure's already come for us, but for the world, how far away do you think we are from disclosure? And that would mean anything, whether it be the government coming out and talking about it or the ETs just landing in the middle of the street. How long do you think we are, or how far away do you think we are from that?
I don't know the number of years, but I think that when human consciousness raises to a level where we will be able to communicate with the ETs and where we are no longer a threat, then there might be disclosure. I can't say if that's 35 years or 50 years or 100 years or what, but I think that there are certain conditions that have to be met before this occurs.
Well, I hope that we all lived. I hope a lot of us, anyways, live to see it. I hope I do. But, well, you know, it is what it is. We know that there's something going on out there, and I guess, you know, it's everybody else I feel bad for, the ones who don't know. So hopefully we can get disclosure one of these days soon. But, Kathleen, thank you so much. And, again, keep up the great work, and I look forward to talking to you again in the near future. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody, there you have it, Kathleen Martin. And
in that part of the study, we had 75 people who did not consider themselves to be experiencers, and they also participated as a control group in this study. And what we discovered is that there of 45 questions, there were 23 commonalities among experiencers that were not common among the general population. For one thing, in the general population, women are, there are slightly more women than men. But Denise and I discovered that 64% of the experiencers who participated in the study were women. I question that result now because, boy, so many men contact Denise and myself. Maybe because we're women. I know that when Bud Hopkins was alive and in David Jacobs' research, they have been contacted by many, many women, more women than men. But the majority of individuals who contact me are men. Pretty amazing.
I was going to say, so if it would pan out that there's more women who are being abducted than men, might that mean that there's a reason behind that, such as, I don't know, reproduction or something like that?
Well, you know, as I said, I question whether or not there are more women than men at this point. And we're going to begin a new research project. And also the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters is working on a research project right now. I'm on the board of directors of that, and we have more than 1,000 participants in our new study. So we will be coming out with statistics as well as soon as all of that information is collated. But moving on to other commonalities, we've discovered that the majority of experiencers said that they had been taken repeatedly over their lifetime. Out of 50, only 2 reported that they had only one abduction, and their characteristics were different than the rest of the group. So 48 out of 50 believed that they had been taken over a lifetime, and a majority of those, or half of those, I should say, believed that they had been taken more than 10 times.
And is there a history of even family members, like I've heard, where people have told me, well, my parents were abducted too, or you know, is it a family thing? Did they keep it in the family?
Yes, there is very strong evidence that this follows family genetic lines. There is.
Incredible. I wonder what the whole agenda behind it is. Have you? I'm sure you've given it thought, and I mean, do you think you have an idea of why this is going on?
I have some hypotheses. Let me put it that way about why I think that this is occurring, and some of this has been given to experiencers. You know, I think that it's been a very long process. I think that they have been watching the development of the human race over a very long period of time. And when we detonated the atomic bombs, it drew their attention. I believe that they realized that we were becoming technologically advanced, to the point where we might go out there. And I think that they wanted to make an assessment of humans to determine where we were on an evolutionary scale and what level of hostility we were exhibiting. And what they would have discovered is that during the 20th century, we exterminated 200 million of our own kind in major and minor wars. I would be very concerned if I were observing an alien race on another planet and saw that kind of behavior and thought that they might possibly be developing the technology that would carry them to Earth to bring their brand of friendship here. So I think that that probably was of major concern to them. And I think that they slowly started to alter our behavior, or attempt to alter our behavior. We do know that, and you've probably all heard this before, but about the hybrid process that the majority of experiencers have observed gestational tanks on board craft, and that they appear to carry fetuses in various stages of development. Some of them appear to be gray ETs, some of them appear to be human, and others appear to be somewhere a cross between human and grays, and sometimes more human, sometimes more gray. What is this all about? That raises questions, assuming that this is true and it's been told over and over again. Many of us researchers believe that the various stages of development are actually a process that is taking place to develop a better human, a human that might be able to communicate with this ET race, a human that will be kinder and more benevolent than what we are now. And it makes sense to me I mean, that's just my guess. That is my hypothesis, but
well, and
who knows? No one knows for sure, that's for sure.
It's a good hypothesis, and it kind of, I look at us, the human race, and I see, remember, we tried to do that, I think, with the bees. Remember, we were going to make this better bee that wasn't going to be affected by some kind of mite or whatever it was, and it turned into being the Africanized killer bee. And so,
right.
you know,
that wouldn't be a good thing if that happened to humans, would it?
No, it wouldn't. So I worry about when any species, whether it be ours or another, who play God. But then I kind of wonder, is that role, are they the gods? I mean, have they been doing this all along?
That's a good question. They could be.
Yeah. One might never know. Now, you're convinced that the abduction phenomena is being covered up by the government, and I would agree with you 1,000% on that. But why do you feel that way? I mean, what do you think they know?
Well, first of all, I think it's being covered up because the UFO phenomenon is being covered up. It dates back to January of 1953 when the Robertson panel met, and it was CIA funded, and the Durant report, that was an outgrowth of the Robertson panel, had made the decision that UFOs were going to be covered up, that the American public was going to be re-educated, programmed to believe that UFOs were not real, to take our interest away from the subject, and a plan that was going to be put into effect was to take people who had sighting reports that were compelling and to debunk those reports and to make that person feel embarrassed, to make them look silly, and then this would stop other people
talk about alien abductions tonight. Are they the government? Are they the ETs? Or is it a little bit of both? What exactly is going on here? We will hopefully get some more answers tonight as we talk with Kathleen, who I am going to bring on with us right about now. So here we go, folks. Hopefully everything works out tonight. I think it will. Kind of get these feelings. Tonight's a good one.
Hello.
Kathleen, hello. This is Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands, and we are live, and I want to welcome you to the show. Hello to you.
Hello. Great to be with you.
Well, it is fantastic to have you on the show tonight. I thank you so much for taking out time to be with us. I've been looking forward to talking with you, and I thought maybe we could start with a little bit of background and leading up to your interest in the UFO phenomena and the abduction phenomena.
Sure.
Thank you.
Would you like me to begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. My interest came from my family's direct contact. I was 13 years old. I had no knowledge or information about UFOs or ET contact before that point, but it was September 20th, 1961. I was seated in the living room of my childhood home, and my mother received a phone call from her sister, Betty Hill. Betty stated that she and my Uncle Barney had a close encounter with a flying saucer the previous evening, and it had come so close that they were worried that they might have been contaminated, and Betty wanted to know what to do. She was really concerned. We had a neighbor who was a physicist, and my mother agreed to call the neighbor, and the rest is history. He told Betty what to do, and I learned for the first time that UFOs were real, and that a couple of years later discovered that they had actually abducted Betty and Barney. So that is when my interest started. It has been a long-term interest. I became very seriously interested in research and investigation back in about 1988. But I had always had an interest from the time I was 13.
Oh, well, then it's going to be real fun talking with you tonight because it is one of my favorite topics because there's so much reality to it. And, you know, there's so many people who are still in denial. And I'm thinking we're at a time now where, come on, people. I mean, you know, there's not millions of people out there lying. But now you actually had family members, Betty and Barney Hill. That's incredible in itself. I've covered that story several times on this show, and you know, I find it to be a true story myself. And there are people who try to debunk it, but the debunkers have been debunked, haven't they?
Yes, they have. I certainly have debunked them, and other people have as well. I wrote about the facts extensively and captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. And I lecture all over the United States about that and about other topics, too, because I'm an ET contacted alien abduction researcher, so I travel around a lot and do a lot of lecturing. But when I talk about Betty and Barney, I often speak about setting the record straight, where I actually show the documented evidence about what happened that night, about what they had to say the next day and during the next month, and their entire history to show that those who are claiming that they saw only a light in the sky and not non-human entities are not telling the truth. And there are a lot of false tales that have been told about this story.
Now, you've been investigating this for a long time. You've been in this field, so I want to pick your brain a little bit. And you know, what have you discovered throughout the years? I mean, you know, how many of these stories, these abduction stories, what are the similarities to them? What are the reasons behind them? Do you think? Give us a little bit of insight on what you've discovered in your research and in your studies.
Well, I have to tell you that in the year 2012, Denise Stoner, who works very closely with me, I am the Mutual UFO Network's director of experiencer research, and Denise is on the team. She is an abductee, and she and I conducted a study, a research project in the year 2012. We developed a questionnaire based upon a number of research studies, academic research studies that had been done, and some other questionnaires as well. And we developed a 45-question questionnaire. We had 50 people who participated